Hello everyone, I'm Lianne Lorraine and welcome to Lectures with Lianne. We're here again on the second Friday of the month at 4 o'clock p.m. at Fred Hess Jr. Community Park, where we're going to enjoy another lecture with Lianne. Today our speaker is going to be Larry Paul. He's a local resident and he is a mid-century modern expert. He will be discussing the architecture of Paul R. Williams, the Seaview Tract in Rancho Palos Verdes, mid-century modern and mid-century modern efficiency. So let's all go inside and let's find out more about the significance of mid-century modern.
I'm specifically going to talk about Paul R. Williams and the Seaview neighborhood, but I'll talk about a little more of the context. This is obviously PV, and you can see that in that pentagon is where Seaview Palos Verdes is today, and you can see just where Terranea is and a little bit of context just so everyone knows where that is, because we're all probably from PV, but we may not know where Seaview is. So it's kind of an interesting neighborhood. It's what I call a cul-de-sac neighborhood because there's no through traffic. So the only people that actually go into Seaview are people that really live in Seaview. More or less, it's been a time capsule, and it's been really kind of neat to see how well preserved many homes are, although things are unfortunately starting to change a bit more now. There's about 190 homes overall in Seaview. But before it was Seaview, and before Paul R. Williams was part of the project, the neighborhood was called Portuguese Bend Estates. And thank you to Lianne and Mom for digging up this document, which is probably the only one left in existence as well. So I want to go back in time and sort of show you some of the context. So if you look back here, this is a photograph from 1957. And a lot of people hear the name Portuguese Bend and they assume it only means the slide area. But actually, Portuguese Bend is more than just the slide area. It actually goes all the way from what is now the tip where it used to be Marineland, which is now Terranea, all the way to the tip of the Trump Golf Course area. And that whole area is the Portuguese Bend. And of course, the Portuguese Bend Estates is highlighted in blue where it used to be. Now it's Seaview. So this is the Portuguese Bend community in 1955. And you can see in the upper right-hand corner is just a little bit of Crenshaw where they were putting Crenshaw in where it was going to connect all the way to PB Drive South. But all that changed on August 17th, 1956. A portion of the gated community had been built on a known dormant ancient landslide. The slow-moving landslide actually started in part because the construction of Crenshaw Boulevard was going to connect, but that was only partially to blame. The homes in Portuguese Bend did not have sewers, they had septic tanks. And of course, back then, everyone had to have green lawns because everyone had green lawns in the 50s. And of course, all that required a lot of watering. And all that watering is also contributing to the saturation of the clay layer that eventually is what made the slide start to happen. Regardless of how it started, 18 days after the first cracks appeared, they saw 4 inches of movement on the street. And by October, they were seeing 4 inches a day of movement. What you're seeing here is the area of the actual slide. So I did a superimposition of the slide map of PV. So by late 1956, they had stopped all construction and all sales in both Portuguese Bend and the Portuguese Bend Estates neighborhoods. And a little more context, all the homes you see in that red area are all gone. There were 170 homes at that time. There's only 30 of them still standing today. So that whole area got wiped out. And part of that is the Portuguese Bend Club, which you can see part of over here. But everything there is completely changed. It really transformed. So they had built around 60 homes in the Portuguese Bend Estates area, and they sat for many years during the investigation. And these homes were the ones that you see here in red. But in this 1957 image, as I zoom in, you can see there are the streets of what is now Seaview, and you can see the homes that were built and were sitting there waiting for owners to during the investigation. Now, geologists eventually concluded that the makeup of the land was fundamentally different under Seaview than it is in the Portuguese Bend slide area. But what they wanted to do was to save the project. They really wanted to do something different. The name Portuguese Bend had been in the news and become infamous with the name slide area and fast-moving destruction of homes and things like that. And they didn't want to have the name Portuguese Bend really advertising the community. So they really went to a new thing, and they found a very hot architect, and Paul R. Williams was that architect. So Paul R. Williams was actually promoted heavily, and the last 2/3 of the neighborhood were all designed by him. And there were many newspaper articles that were ads, and I will call them articles. They were really advertising pieces that were disguised as articles. These are from the LA Times. And many of those ads actually featured Paul R. Williams, and they go on to say each Seaview PV home is skillfully designed by Paul R. Williams and promoted. And they also promoted the honor that he received in 1957, as well as name dropping some of the famous clients. I think here it says Cary Grant and Danny Thomas, Julie London, Frank Sinatra, other homes that he had designed for people. But he developed a unique look with 41 different styles, but it was really more than just that. There were 41 charming exteriors, is how they phrased it, and 9 distinguished floor plans. But what they did is they actually took the homes and they mixed up the way that they were done. So some were reversed. Some didn't have a garage in front. They had the garage on the side. Some had different facades. They had all these different looks and styles. And that really gave the homes a lot of different character, even though there were only 9 different floor plans. It was really 58, 59 is when he got engaged. It was really 59, 60 when they really restarted construction. So everything was really redone then. So this is the Plan 1, the Biscayne. So if you look at these homes, if you look at just the renderings, I don't think most people would say that those are the same homes, but they're actually the same exact floor plan, but they look very different. So you can see the butterfly roof on the one on the top, and there's the one of the 2 surviving examples of a butterfly roof that's on Dauntless. The other styles, they just look very different. They do not look like the same floor plan, but they all had unique character. So this is the Riviera, and you'll notice they all had names. You'll notice that house has a 22.5-degree angle, and Paul R. Williams did a lot of 22.5-degree angles in the home. 22.5 degrees, people always say, well, why 22.5? That's a pretty random, arbitrary number. It's actually half of a 45. It makes things stand out with a little bit more character. So if you look at the fireplace and where part of the kitchen is, because of that angle, it really gives the room a very different dynamic feel to it. So the marina design, again, with this 22.5-degree angle, you can see the long divider that was there. You'll notice the garage doors. Some garage doors had these diamond patterns on. Actually, 9 different garage door patterns as well. The garage door patterns, usually the ones with the diamond were on a pitched roof design. So they would go with that same kind of a look and feel. You can see the one on the bottom, there's a cinder block courtyard. That's original, but that's the same basic concept of what's here that you see there. So the Copacabana, I love the names. These are all Copacabana, but if you look at this one with the vaulted, the very dramatic vaulted roof line that really protruded up, and it was this really very unique style, really very mid-century modern. But you'll notice the rendering over here. I didn't take a picture. I only had so many spaces. But if you look over here, you'll see the clear story windows along the top. That actually gave an extra 10-foot ceilings. So it brought a lot of light into the room. And even though those are exactly the same floor plan, they certainly don't look and feel like they are. The Bermuda plan, again with the 22.5-degree angle. This was a 3-bedroom style home. Again, very different look and feel. With the way their style and with the character of the home. The Monte Carlo is actually what my wife Julie and I live in, is a Monte Carlo. That's a picture of it in the upper corner. But you'll see different garage door patterns. Some had flat roofs, some had pitch roofs, some were reversed, some had overhangs over the garage, some didn't have overhangs over the garage. Each one of these, this was the 4-bedroom, this was the largest floor plan. The Eden Rock. This is one of the more common floor plans in the neighborhood. This was more square, but you'll see that angle that you'll notice with the fireplace that sort of sticks out. Gives it a little bit more character, a little bit more style. I think that's what you're in, right? The Lido. Again, you see the renderings and the actual construction. This also had that little bit of a jut, even though it's a more rectangular design. There was still that angle that came in there. And Plan 9, and not Plan 9 from outer space, but Plan 9 never got a name. Because the brochure that they made only had 8 spots. So they never gave it a name. However, the name may be in an archive somewhere, which I'll get to a little bit later. Part of the character of these homes was the lighting fixtures. They were all actually designed. They were all Feldman Lighting Company made custom lights for the neighborhood. So the only homes that had these Feldman lights, even though Feldman Lighting Company made lights for a lot of different people, the Feldman Lighting Company was unique. Or these lights were unique to the neighborhood. And they had lots of different styles, O'Keefe and Merritt stoves, and they had these rocker glow lights. And speaking of the rocker glow light switches, there's a bank of 3 of them. They were like mini rocker switches, and they were actually silenced silver, and they glowed in the dark. They were made illegal because they had a little drop of mercury in them. Because that's what made them work, but they were fantastic little tiny rocker switches, and when you turn off the lights, you actually see a little glow from them. It's kind of neat. And you see the dividers. You can see these screens that were used again, or the PV stone fireplace was a pretty iconic part of Paul R. Williams' design. So he really had an incredible career. He was doing nearly 80 projects a year for about 60 years. So he did about 3,600 projects, mostly in Southern California, mostly with corporate clients, fancy clients, and also middle-income clients. He was the first African American of the AIA in 1923. You might have noticed at the end of that last slide, I had a little thing where it crossed out the LAX theme building. He has been attributed, because of this photograph, and it's been repeated and repeated and repeated in the media, as he is the architect of the LAX theme building. It was actually designed by a gentleman named Jin Wang, another brilliant, incredible architect who actually just passed away, I think, in 2017. Jin Wang was the actual one who designed the LAX theme building. But Paul R. Williams was one of the architects involved in the LAX project. There were actually many different companies and contractors and developers that worked to develop the LAX complex when they redesigned it back in the late 50s. We believe, and I'm still corroborating everything because I can't believe everything I read because there's a lot of, I'm finding errors in things, but it appears that he was the lead on the Tom Bradley International Terminal. But because this picture was taken by Julius Schulman, one of the most famous mid-century modern architects, he was associated with the LAX theme building, and it got repeated as an urban legend. So he clearly got some accolades during his lifetime. And in the decades after his passing, he was recognized as one of the greatest architects of the 20th century. And it was believed that all of his designs were lost in the 1982 riots. But Karen Elise Hudson, his granddaughter, actually had taken all of his architectural designs with her and saved 35,000 building plans and drawings and blueprints. Unfortunately, the business records were all lost in the riots. So the bank where everything was stored was burned to the ground. Everything was gone. So we don't have the history of exactly which projects that he worked on, except for we have the blueprints. There is a project right now. She donated all those things to the Getty Research and USC School of Architecture, where Paul R. Williams went. But Paul R. Williams, just a tremendous architect, in 1923 became a member of the AIA. And just the things he had to do, like draw upside down, because white customers weren't comfortable with a black person sitting next to them. So he learned how to draw upside down and write upside down so people would be comfortable. For him to be a talent, to be recognized in that way, in that era, was really pretty incredible. But he was an amazing talent, amazing architect, did so many different projects in so many different styles. And Seaview, this was really a very unusual thing for him to do, was design a neighborhood. Most everything he did was either corporate or custom homes for famous people or not famous people, but he did in many different styles, Spanish Revival, all sorts of different styles. So it wasn't just mid-century modern. I'm very passionate about, Paul R. Williams architecture, and I'm also very interested in the preservation of everything to do with mid-century modern architecture in general. And I'm actually very fortunate that I'm in possession of some unique Seaview artifacts. This is the only copy in existence of a Seaview brochure, which has just some wonderful wording in it, but it was the 3D glasses, because in the 50s and 60s that was. This was found in a file cabinet of an original owner And because it was so large, it wouldn't fit in the file cabinet. It went underneath the files, and that's the reason why it survived. Otherwise, it would have been pitched long ago. I also have the blueprints for the neighborhood. I have all but a couple pages. So I have, I feel very fortunate that I have been able to gather a lot of original documents and really try to preserve that. Over 30 years ago, when Julie was just my girlfriend, we started going to antique shows and swap meets. And in the beginning, there were interesting, we found Art Nouveau and Art Deco and Craftsman, but over time, we both gravitated to the mid-century modern items. We really kind of both really liked that. And the hunt for the right thing was just part of our fun. And we went to Palm Springs, and we went to modernism shows, and we were really into all this for years. We love the architecture. We've been to the Gamble House in Pasadena, the Kaufman House in Palm Springs, the Eames House, which is a case study home in Pacific Palisades. We went to Falling Water, which is a Frank Lloyd Wright home in outside of Pittsburgh, and many, many other homes, Kentuck Knob and many others. And we sought opportunities to visit as many of the case homes as possible. And we've attended conferences and focused specifically on mid-century modern designs. We met Eames Demetrius, who was the grandson of Charles and Ray Eames. But we got married almost exactly 26 years ago, and we started looking for our ideal home. And we visited over 100 homes, and we looked at like 140 through catalogs. And we, after nearly a year of hunting, we put our first and only offer in on a home, which was actually a Herb G. Reisenberg home. It was a custom 1956 home done by one of the architects who was considered one of the master planners for Beverly Hills. It was a modest home. It wasn't an incredible home, but it was a custom-built home. And actually, in my research, I discovered that Mr. Reisenberg actually worked with Paul R. Williams on a couple of projects, including one of them being a frat house at UCLA in 1929. So on our house in the valley in Encino Hills, we spent a lot of time just peeling back things that the previous owners had done. We removed the fluorescent lights. We removed the fake wood paneling that they had put up. We took down the horrible curtains that they had. And we just sort of peeled away all the stuff that really shouldn't have been there, and we try to bring it back. And we love that home, but unfortunately, my mom had passed away very peacefully in her sleep, and that was about 7 years after my dad passed away. And my siblings and I began the daunting task of going through the home. And I grew up in that home before I had moved away. And there was a lot of stuff in the house. But my oldest brother, Jim, said, why don't you and Julie consider buying this house? Now, the home, we hadn't really been thinking of that because we were happy in the valley. We were happy with our house. But that's really where our journey began with this house. So our house, as I was mentioning, is a Monte Carlo Elevation D. There were 5 different looks for the Monte Carlo, as I mentioned, and some were mirrored and reversed. And this actually was what the house looked like in 1969 on the day we moved into the house. And basically, this is what it looked like in 2009, just after my mom's passing. So, and this is what it looks like actually at the end of our first phase of our restoration in 2015. So we're really trying to bring back that mid-century modern feel and character. We're looking for a house in 69. My dad walked into this house, walked straight in the backyard, and said, this one. Didn't even know if there was a bathroom or a kitchen, didn't care. This is the view, this is where he wanted to be. And it, sort of like our experience with buying the house in the valley, this was the only home that they really ever put an offer in on. It was the largest of the homes at 29 square feet, and there was an addition that you'll see there. That addition added another 400 square feet. So unfortunately, shortly after my parents closed escrow, my dad noticed that there was an ominous crack in the wall right between where the addition was. And then we could see a sliver of light. And of course, he patched it, and then the sliver of light would reappear. And my parents got really good at patching the walls. But they loved everything about the home and the location. However, over time, more cracks started appearing, and now it just wasn't limited to the addition. The whole house was really kind of tweaking. And but my parents just kept on spackling and painting and making the house look good. They never really dealt with the complexity of what was going on. But it also became clear as we were going through the house that there were many severe structural problems with the house. And we couldn't even, an appraiser wouldn't even touch the house. They had to have special appraisers that work with distressed properties. It was a big deal. So we had geology studies done, we had all these things done. And the good news, it was not part of the slide, and there are parts that have some issues with slides, but our house is actually not in a slide. But the back addition was nearly a foot lower than the front of the house, and it was all one level by the time of my mom's passing. What you're seeing here is some of the foam that my dad added in, and I could actually pass my entire hand through there. By that point, my dad put molding up and redid the cottage cheese where the gap had grown, and kept on adding more molding and doing all these things. And the cracks were appearing in the ceilings, and at one point the ceiling of the living room had completely come down. You can see where there's buckling and there's cracking on the outside. I mean, there was a lot of problems, and inside the house, every part of the house had major issues, and you can see where repatching had been done. And we also have expansive clay soil, and that's part of what also contributed to this. So there were a number of things that had happened. But I was mentioning the PV stone fireplace, and this is my niece and nephew, and she's now 50. Hope she won't mind me saying that. This is the original fireplace, and that's actually my grandfather's artwork that was actually done for USC. That's the only other copy outside of what's at USC. That was the original USC marching band shield and helmet and spears and swords. But because it was a Paul R. Williams house, Julie and I really, really wanted it to be saved. We also knew if we didn't save it, no one else would. And while it had lasted my parents' lifetime, we knew it was not going to last too much longer. And so we said, we really got to figure out what to do here. And we did 3 years of investigating on what to do, how to save it, working out everything with the family, because I didn't own it. We had to buy them out and everything. And we really had to do all this, but we also wanted to enhance the mid-century modern character that had been pretty compromised by the original owners. And I love my parents, but they weren't exactly the kindest to the mid-century modern motif either. So just a little bit more context on Seaview. This is the land in 1924 before Seaview was built. Give you another look at Seaview and a different angle on Seaview just from an overhead view. And again, here's another view. This was after the Livingston Quarry had begun its grading work. And this is a topo map from 1946, I believe. And that red box is where our house was. It was at the deepest part of a ravine. So we had to have a geology study done, and people thought we were drilling for oil. They didn't know what the hell we were doing. But we did. The city made us do a geology study, and in this, we actually sent a geologist down this hole, and you can see the gentleman about getting ready to ride down the hole into the ground, and went 60 some odd feet into the ground to look at the strata. And even though the structural engineering team said it won't affect anything to do with the house, but the city needs the data. So we had to do that. And when they left, it looked just the way it did before they had done anything. It was a pretty incredible process when they did that. But when I was a kid, I remember with each heavy rain, there were several inches of water that would just flood the backyard, constantly flooding the backyard. And water would just sit there for days because of the clay soil. So the situation with the soil was really exacerbated because the water was never managed on the property. There was no drainage, no rain gutters, and the expansive clay soil, which basically expands when it gets wet and shrinks when it gets dry, does havoc on plaster and drywall and everything else. And when we did our investigation of the house, the inspectors found this watermark in the foundation, like a high tide mark where you could see where mud had flooded. There was all sorts of problems underneath the house. There was mold and mildew, and it was a wonderful place to live. And I'm making it sound like it was a horrible thing, but it was actually a great place for my parents to live, and I lived there. No one really investigated what the problems were. But the inspector said words that I live by this day, and I recommend that everyone who lives in a home take this under serious advisement, which is water kills houses. If you manage the water, your house will live. If you don't manage the water, your house will be destroyed. And this house was definitely severely compromised because of all the water. So we also learned the two other things, with the bedrock being 70 feet below the house, where the house was, where they dug down until they got into the bedrock, but that was at the street. And because we were on a ravine, it was really deep where our house was. And that's why it took a long time to figure out what to do. So basically, we didn't want to make the house any larger or smaller. We just wanted to sort of elegantly graft on that square footage that had to come down. And we wanted to pull it away from the deepest part of the fill because it really extended in the backyard. So the house, if it was never added onto, probably would have been fine because the house was built on compacted soil. But when they put the addition on, the addition basically went deeper into the backyard, and that sank and twisted and pulled the whole house and twisted everything. And so we also had to figure out how to work with a 22.5-degree angle. It's just like, squares are really easy. Odd angles are just really hard to figure out how to graft things on. So we got Paul R. Williams books. We had, plus all of our archives, we had photographs of all these different mid-century style homes and things we had looked at over the years. But ultimately, we had to do the first phase in one big chunk, which is replace the foundation. And that is not trivial. So this was our plan for the final design on phase one. It had a very open floor plan. And this design, we built the new PV stone fireplace, but it was in the same visual line when you walk in. You would sort of see it in the same location from the foyer, but it was just pushed a little further back. So it was not blocking the view. So the fireplace was, as I was mentioning, a very iconic part of this. And we came up with a design based on the blueprints we had, looking at other Paul R. Williams designs. We really try to keep the character of it, but it wasn't going to be original, but we wanted to make it have the right character. So what we did is we actually peeled off the area in green and we put that square footage in the area in blue and grafted into one large space. So it used to be 4 smaller rooms. There was an enclosed patio, there was the addition, there was the dining room and the living room. Now it was one large space. But there was one issue left, what to do with the kitchen. You can see it's behind this big wall to the great room. And unfortunately, the kitchen was sort of falling apart. The cabinets were really dying. Appliances were dead. I mean, it lasted 60 years, so I can't totally complain. But the cabinets were not of the best character, the quality that needed to really do that. Plus, the mid-century character had really been lost with the painting of all the wood and everything else. We put a tremendous effort into making the house structurally sound that would last and have a period look, but it was important that the house work for the way we live. Unfortunately, there was all these challenges, as I was mentioning, with the kitchen, but we do like to cook, and the kitchen is super important to us. And although when there's no pandemic going on, we would like to have people over at our house, but everyone always crams in the kitchen. And either they all cram in the kitchen, and there was that wall that sort of prevented us from looking out, or everyone's on the other side of the wall, and we're in the kitchen. And that's why we were like, well, we really want to change things. Julie would ask, well, why are we staring at a wall of cabinets when there's this view of Catalina? And we're staring at a wall of cabinets. We spend a lot of time in the kitchen. Why don't we look at this? So we looked at a new kitchen design with the rest of phase one, but we couldn't do it at the time because it was a lot of money. And we were trying to do the repair work first, and then we would do pull permits for doing the changes to the house. But first, we just had to do the repair work as sort of one clean thing. And because I work in professional visualization, which is a word that will not really mean much to most people, because it's not a consumer type thing, although things are starting to happen with head-mounted displays. I worked in large visualization systems where I would basically walk through a space. I built everything in 3D computer models. This is the 3D computer model. And it's very crude compared to the stuff that we do professionally, but that's me actually inside of a full visualization system. The hat renders the world as I'm seeing things. And there's our fireplace with the replaced USC fittings from my great-grandfather, or my grandfather. And there I am looking at where our table's going to be. We sort of mocked up where the kitchen ultimately could be, so we wanted to figure some things out. Things look really distorted on the camera because it is only designed to work from my eye point, from where I'm standing. So where I'm standing looks correct. Where you're seeing it looks really kind of bizarre and blurry because it's in 3D. So here's some of the the process we went through. So we built a wall, basically separating the construction area, the main construction area. We chiseled off all the PV stone off the fireplace, and we removed the room, removed the fireplace. It was a tremendous amount of effort, and that room we weren't as concerned about, but the foundation, we had huge amounts of dirt, and I mean, we were removing dirt and piles and excavating all these things and building these giant passageways underneath the house. And they basically supported the entire house while they blew away parts of the foundation. So these are these passageways underneath the house, and those are my kids at the time. But these were actually fairly tall spaces where all the rebar cages are positioned. So we had miles of rebar that we brought in. Nobody would be crazy enough to do what we did. I don't know, so it's a little nuts. But we built these giant rebar cages to make a structure that was never going to go anywhere. We had 17 truckloads of concrete that filled up our foundation. And you can see the original foundation sort of outlined in red versus our foundation in green, and that's in the shallower part of the foundation where it's not as big. This was the addition. They had just built it. It was legally done, permitted, but they just built it over the original patio, which was not structurally reinforced. And you can see how deep these holes were. I mean, just a huge amount of concrete and rebar and structure and these long pieces, and then we poured concrete, and then we put in drainage, French drains, very important because we don't want to kill our house. So they built the flooring and the foundation, and they added all this structure. And you can see we had a big beam put in with some steel, and this was the big beam that spanned the space because we didn't want to have a post in the middle of the room. We wanted to have a nice big expansive space. So you can see this is as it was sort of getting done. And then we also did structural shear walls on 3 sides of the house. We put in new windows. We replaced everything. We used denim insulation, which is much easier on the environment for us breathing and everything else. But it's this great sound insulation. We put it underneath the floor in the attic, or there's no attic, in the ceiling space. And so this is what the model, this is what we were projecting it to look like, and this is what it actually turned out to be. So we were very, very happy with the way that we went from concept to reality. And you can see Catalina, we placed the tree, we placed everything else, and there's an actual photograph of the view we have from our kitchen. That's what we look at when we're doing our cooking now, which is a lot better than staring at a big wall. So from the front of the house, you actually can't tell that anything changed. And that was actually kind of our design goal. We didn't want to change the look. So our front facade is still the same front facade, but everything else has dual pane windows, Cardinal 366 glass, things like that. The fireplace was especially effective. People would walk in and say, well, I know you did stuff, but that fireplace is original. And it's like, no, it's not. But we matched the texture of the brickwork on the inside and everything else. So that was phase 1 of the project. About 3 years later, once we recovered, we started on phase 2, which is building the new kitchen. So we had planned ahead. We knew where things were going to be roughly. We had put in some task lighting, which actually delayed our project by 2 months because the only manufacturer that sold a California legal piece that is the right style, it was a custom build order. It took 2 months. We stopped the construction for 2 months waiting for these parts to get built because we weren't going to put in the wrong light fixtures. But we were ready to go with some of this. So, we were struggling with the detail, and you saw some of the layouts, but we were not happy with the way that it kind of jutted into the room. It was sort of this corner felt really awkward. And then we went, hey, look, the original plans have this grill or this design, and when you line it up, our design actually worked perfectly for the edge of that grill to line up exactly with that wall. So there I am, that's me in the sort of dark color, and there's the original screen that was actually on the side of our house that the original owners had taken away. They put in something else. It was in rather poor condition, but we documented it, and we built a new one to the exact dimensions, but we didn't do it out of paint grade wood. We did stain grade wood. We just up the quality a little bit, but we gave all this to the contractor to build. And this was the final kitchen design. So there you see the screen. I don't have the whole house in there. There is a room back there, but that's the space, and this is what it looks like now. So we went with period-appropriate Formica that actually matched the pattern of Formicas that were used in Seaview. We built these angled cabinets, which were something that was done in the 50s and 60s. It was all part of that mid-century modern character. There's the boomerang patterns. We had both white and black backgrounds. We used stainless steel for the countertop. Just tried to make a style that was very much in keeping with piano hinges, and you'll see we put in modern appliances. We didn't do, some people actually put in original vintage appliances, but we actually like to cook. We enjoyed doing all that, but we got handles that were period appropriate, but we put in soft close, doors or drawers. But the angled cabinets really give it a character, and without a swing door, I could be standing there and Julie can grab something out of the cabinet without having to move out of the way. So Julie and I actually did the 100% of the design of both the redesign of the house and the kitchen. We hired structural engineers to do the structural engineering, but we did these are all my plans. I did everything on the computer. Everything was measured to a final detail, but this is our design build process where we basically made a room inside the room, and they built it in place, and they had their own door to the outside, and we were able to build everything. While we had a kitchen, as much as it was, we got the finishes just what we wanted with the handles that we wanted. And then after they were done staining, they pulled away the plastic and they started doing it. And we brought in our 18-foot-long stainless steel counter. It was an interesting challenge and project to try to figure out what to do, how to do all this. So we really wanted to retain the mid-century modern character, and we also we brought that philosophy. There was a philosophy in mid-century which was exploring new ideas in design and materials, appliances of the future. If you remember, for those who are around long enough, back in the 50s, it was the future. Appliances that make your life easier and everything else. So we try to bring that philosophy in. We brought it up to the next level with efficient appliances that use less energy. We have an induction stove which is absolutely fantastic. We have 2 dishwashers, make our lives easier. They'll also use less water and are quiet and are very quiet. And we did, as I mentioned, we did things like rain gutters and insulation and crazy stuff like that was not done originally. But we also installed new sub-panels. We upgraded the electrical, which originally was 100 amps, which was actually a lot for that time, but we have electric cars and things like that. We have a 4-zone heat pump AC system, so we actually heat our house and cool our house off the sun. We have 4 zones, so we are only heating or cooling the part of our house that we're actually in. So at night, we don't heat or cool the living room or the dining room area or the kitchen area. We only heat the bedrooms, and we do the opposite during the day. A lot of these specific Seaview things that I mentioned, the light switches, these silent silver light switches, I actually was able to find with one of my colleagues, one of my friends who lives in Seaview. We found on eBay, sitting on somebody's shelf in Kansas, boxes of these light switches that were brand new, 1962 issue, still in the original boxes. And we got all the original things. There are some of the light switches in the original boxes, but they were brand new switches. And it was just a fantastic find. It allowed us to sort of bring that original character into the house. But we used GFCI fault breakers instead of having the new modern Decora type that have the button on them. We put special breakers on the house so we would be able to use the original style plugs as well. So the lighting, as I mentioned, was an important detail. And we have a lot of original Feldman lights, but we also have some that are not original Feldman lights, but they are period. They're all using LED bulbs, which is much more efficient. And thanks to Price Morgan, who's a neighbor of ours, who is now living in Texas because he went to school there, but he was able to gather a bunch of the light fixtures and was able to help us restore, that's in our master bedroom. He was able to help us restore things. He was a kid who was fascinated by Pollard Williams at the time and the neighborhood, and did a lot of documentation, and so he and I are working to do some things together. These are the light fixtures that delayed our construction, the task lights that we put in before we did the kitchen, and we did those outside as well. And they have to be water rated for outdoor, and they have to be insulated rated for indoor for California. These are Mo lighting fixtures actually from the 50s, and they have these wonderful little atomic patterns on them. But we have a pull down for our dining table, and we have other ones, but they have these, it's very, very 50s, very kind of kitschy atomic, which we kind of like. So we also did an upgrade, as I mentioned, of our electrical. We added 34 solar panels on our roof, and now everything is powered by the sun. Everything we use to cook and heat and clean, most everything is now all electric. Plus we charge 3 electric vehicles at the same time. For the past 5 years, we've been actually generating more electricity than we have been consuming, and we added a Tesla Powerwall system on the side of our house, which looks a little bit like a substation, which I'm not happy about, but that's okay. But it also gives us backup power. So if the power goes out, we're able to keep on running our house, and we're really unaware, except I get a text alert when the power goes down. But that allows us to offset our power usage, and this is all part of that 50s philosophy. This is the brochure that was mainly used to sell the Seaview homes, the Pollard Williams Seaview homes, and as I mentioned, there were only 8. But you can read, they talk about the silver contact light switches and the TV and telephone outlets that were featured everywhere. We, on the other hand, because we're not trying to say that it's all original, we're calling ours Plan 10 of 9, and we call it the Pollyanna, and there's a reason for the name Pollyanna. That's my dad and my mom in 1943 when they welcomed my oldest brother. And they, living in Bermuda, they had an opportunity of naming the home. My dad was stationed there during World War II, and he named it the Pollyanna, of course spelled P-A-U-L, as in our name, Paul. And so we decided to sort of carry on that tradition and call it the Pollyanna. We finished phase 2, and we're going to do more things. But basically, our motto for the house is mid-20th century design, mid-21st century technology and efficiency. So we've completed phases 1 and 2. Pandemic sort of stopped everything else, plus life getting in the way. We're going to do more remodeling over time. But it's been a challenge and a joy. And we're probably a little bit crazy for doing everything we've done, except that it's gotten us exactly the result that we wanted, and I think my parents would be happy that we're carrying on the tradition of living there. It is a home that my parents loved. Matter of fact, right after my dad passed and I took my mom from the hospital, before we left the parking lot, my mom said, "I want to stay in the house. I want to be there. I want to stay, this is where I want to be." And I said, "Mom, as long as it's safe for you to be there, I will do everything I can to keep you safe in that house." And our home was an extreme example, and I don't want to discourage people from exploring being able to do things. The condition of our home was pretty extreme, but we also think that preserving these homes, caring for these homes, it's part of the history, and being able to preserve a Pollard Williams home. There was no way to restore our house to original just because of the structural issues, and it allowed us to sort of free think a little bit, but we also try to honor, we felt like we were channeling Pollard Williams actually because of looking at all of his work. We understood his design philosophies, and actually, even though he wasn't considered to be really a mid-century modern architect, even though he did this, his writings from the 40s were really he was really a prophet when it came to understanding the way people live is very important, and that's what we really enjoyed doing. And I thank you to Julie for being a partner with me in this whole process. We have done this together, and things that worked for one of us didn't work for the other, we didn't do. We had to both be happy with the end result, and we worked tirelessly to get every little detail right. And that's things that worked for us, and we did the kitchen back in 2017, 2018 timeframe, and we love it today. We spend our time in the kitchen and we love every minute of it, and it's been a blast. So anyways, with that, I say thank you and happy to answer any questions if there are questions.
So I always thought Paul Williams designed homes in Rolling Hills. I didn't think he had anything to do with PV Estates.
Right.
Was there an area in Rolling Hills that was called Williamsburg?
Yes, the Williamsburg Lane was an area that he designed, I believe, 9 homes on Williamsburg Lane in Rolling Hills. And
Still there?
I believe they are. Yeah. That was Dana. So those homes are still there. A lot of his homes, unfortunately, are being lost. But there's now an awareness, and there's now a recognition of who he was as an architect and his significance. And there are people who are trying to save Paul R. Williams homes, and we're trying to do that as well. So although it's not 100% original, we feel like we've sort of carried on that character. You have a question?
I'm just curious to know when your house was built, I know that you said the geologists cleared it, the slide
Right.
area, but did they not notice the clay that you mentioned in the soil as they were building and
Well,
not set off alarm bells for drainage?
What they did on our home is that they added a lot of fill dirt. And fill dirt is actually, people think when you put a pool in, it's very heavy, but actually dirt is heavier than water, that's why it would sink. If they had cleared out the 1 foot thick layer of clay before they did the fill, our home would have been fine. But unfortunately, 40 feet down, when they added the man-made fill on top of the natural fill, there was that layer of soil. They didn't have that kind of study. What they did, they discovered it was not the same kind of a condition that was occurring in the Portuguese Bend slide area, where the slide was happening, but the soil basically was it's a compressible soil. And I forgot. I apologize. I have had no sleep. But there's that layer of soil, that layer of clay. If they had only removed that, we wouldn't have had any issues. But unfortunately, they didn't do that investigation then. All they did was say, yep, it's a different condition here. And even the parts of Seaview that there is a section that is having some slide issues, it is being pulled along by the slide area, but it's moving as a unit. It's not moving like the slide area does. It's moving in its blocks. So I've done a ton of geology study, which I did. I mean, I could go on for hours, which I know we don't have. But there was a lot of study done, and we wanted to make sure before we put 1 penny into it that we weren't just throwing our money away. And we had to make it last our lifetime. So that's why we did the investment that we did. Please.
You mentioned in the beginning the southwestern side of Seaview was actually developed before Paul R. Williams got involved.
Correct.
And there were, would you say 13 homes?
No, 60 homes approximately.
60.
60.
60 homes.
Yes.
And they were on towards Palos Verdes Drive south.
Correct.
West of Schooner.
Correct.
That's interesting. Okay, so were those just contractor designed homes? Or?
No, it was actually done by the same contractor. These homes here were the ones that were done by the Lindy Corporation. Same builder, same developer, but they just changed direction. They had a master plan with all the homes they had designed homes, and then they just canned those designs, and they wanted to do something different. The homes that are built here, you'll see if you ever go into Seaview, you'll see there are no sidewalks for those homes. And it's a different character. We affectionately call them storybook homes. They're a different style. They are mid-century, but they're a different style. But they are all these homes, and as best I can tell, those are the ones. There's 2 that I don't believe were developed at the time. But those homes were done by the same architect, not same architect, same builder, developer, but not the same architect. Thank you very much, everyone.
So I hope you enjoyed today's lecture. Come and join us on any second Friday of the month at 4 o'clock p.m. for another free, fun, fabulous lecture with Lianne. If you'd like more information about the schedule, please see my Facebook page, Lectures with Lianne. If you'd like to contact me, you can find me at palasverdespulse@gmail.com. Thank you again for coming, and we look forward to seeing you next time.